Shell-covered mouth baffles archaeologists. Mysterious Viking burial with scallop shells over woman's mouth baffles archaeologists. A rare and puzzling Viking Age burial discovered in Norway has left archaeologists searching for answers after a skeleton was found with the scallop shells carefully placed over a mouth. A ritual never before documented in pre-Christian Scandinavian graves. And now we dive into the heart of this story right here on the AI
So
podcast.
we're diving into a 1,200-year-old silent enigma today.
Found in a field in Trøndelag County, Norway.
And this is far more than just another Viking burial.
hmm
It's it's a profound spiritual contradiction buried right there in the earth.
It really is.
Just imagine this scene. You have a woman of unmistakable status buried in the 9th century, the high point of the early Viking Age.
Right.
She's surrounded by all the traditional markers of her wealth and power, but then there are these two scallop shells lying deliberately over her mouth.
It's the kind of archaeological puzzle that really forces experts to redraw the maps of early Scandinavian spiritual life.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that the initial find, which was an oval brooch, was made by a metal detectorist, Roy Sereng.
Oh, wow.
And he had the presence of mind to immediately alert the experts at NTNU, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology.
Which is so important. So for this deep dive, we're looking at the research papers and the notes from that NTNU team. And our mission is pretty critical. We need to figure out what those shells, which are globally recognized centuries later as this iconic symbol of Christian pilgrimage.
The Camino de Santiago, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What were they doing in a deeply pagan, distinctly 9th century grave? I mean, that gap, that's the core mystery we need to unlock for you.
And we really need to set the historical context first. The 9th century is when the Vikings were just starting their huge raids and trade networks.
Because things are moving.
Knowledge, goods, and crucially symbols were beginning to travel vast distances. For Raymond Sauvage, the archaeologist leading the research, this one detail, the shells, it's so unusual.
So it's not a common find.
Not at all. It signals a genuinely rare, probably highly localized spiritual practice that just doesn't appear anywhere in the standard record of pre-Christian funerals.
So a custom unique to this one community.
That's the idea.
Okay, let's unpack this woman's identity first, because I think understanding who she was tells us how seriously we should take the ritual. She wasn't an isolated figure, she was somebody.
She was important. The initial findings confirm she was interred sometime around 800-900 CE.
And we know her status mostly through her grave goods, right? Which were surprisingly intact.
Yes. Her clothing fasteners were the key. In Viking society, what you wore, and especially how you fastened it, just spoke volumes about your status and your wealth.
Okay, so they found two beautifully crafted oval brooches.
Tortoise brooches, yeah, that's what they're often called.
And these were used to fasten the straps of a suspender dress, which was, that was the formal attire for a high-status Viking woman, right?
Absolutely. It's the definitive marker. But we can go even deeper than just high status.
How so?
Well, the specific style of these brooches helps us date the burial very, very precisely. Archaeologists look at the patterns, the form, and these typically fall into well-known categories.
So they're like a timestamp.
In a way, yes. Brooches like this often place them chronologically alongside major finds like the Oseberg ship burial. They aren't just functional, they're high-value artistic objects.
So she had the jewelry, she had a ring buckle. It all suggests a complex, layered outfit, typical of the wealthy.
It does. And based on this, the archaeologists concluded she was a free and probably married woman. A powerful title in that social structure.
More than that, though, she was assessed to be the mistress of the farm.
The Husfreyja, yes. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, the Husfreyja was the manager of the entire domestic and economic sphere.
Especially when the men were away trading or raiding.
Exactly. She held the keys, she managed the labor, she controlled the household finances. It was a position of immense respect and real local power.
That distinction is just crucial. It means we're not looking at some marginal or oddball burial.
No.
This was effectively a state funeral, in a local sense, for a pillar of her community.
Precisely. Which means the ritual they performed for her must have carried significant weight.
If they went to that much trouble for her jewelry, the ritual had to be just as important.
Exactly. So adding a bizarre new ritual element, the shells can only mean something deeply intentional about her journey to the afterlife.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. The central enigma. Let's just focus on the shells. It wasn't just a handful of beach detritus tossed in the grave. The report is very clear about the precision of the placement.
Indeed. There were two scallop shells. positioned with their curved sides facing outward, and they were partially covering her lips.
So this was a deliberate act.
A performed ritual, yes, not an accident.
And the really extraordinary part is what Raymond Sauvage confirmed, that this specific practice, using the scallop shell this way,
Has never been documented in any pre-Christian grave in Norway.
that statement is just a five-alarm fire in Viking archaeology. It challenges everything.
It creates this tremendous cultural collision, spanning centuries. For most people today, and certainly for anyone from the Middle Ages on, the scallop shell is the unmistakable symbol of the pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela.
The cult of St. James. Pilgrims wore them to show they had made the journey.
Right. But here's the problem with the timing. The big pilgrimage cult wasn't really a thing until the 12th century.
300 years after this woman was buried.
So you have a pagan woman in the 9th century, right as the Viking Age is kicking off, using a symbol that will later become the quintessential image of medieval Christian travel.
And that raises the big question. Was the symbolism borrowed? Or does the shell just have parallel, unrelated meanings in two completely different cultures?
So we have two main interpretations.
And both are pretty compelling.
Okay, interpretation one. The pagan Viking meaning is totally unique to this specific area, this one farm in Trøndelag, and we've lost its meaning.
Right. Maybe it was a family totem or tied to a local sea god we don't know about. The later Christian link would just be a coincidence.
And that seems plausible given how diverse Norse beliefs were from place to place.
It is. But the second interpretation is maybe more provocative. It connects with the Viking Age as a period of huge cultural contact. Could there have been some extremely early, unrecognized borrowing of symbolism? Through trade, you mean?
Potentially.
I mean, Trøndelag is on the coast. It had access to massive trade networks. If Viking traders were already in contact with communities on the edge of Christian Europe,
Or even as far south as Iberia.
could they have picked up the symbol as just a general sign of long-distance sea travel, long before its specific religious meaning was attached?
It's possible. The shell is fundamentally a symbol of the distant sea. For the Vikings, who were defined by maritime travel, that's a powerful metaphor.
But no matter where it came from, we have to ask why the mouth.
That's the really unsettling visual of this whole thing.
Yeah, the mouth is linked to speech, to breath of life force, to secrets, the passage of the soul.
Exactly. Was it meant to silence her? To seal a secret? Or maybe to prevent the soul from leaving too early?
Or the opposite. Maybe it was supposed to help the journey, like the shell, as a vessel, was meant to hold her final breath.
The deliberate nature of the act is what makes us search for a symbolic explanation.
Absolutely fascinating. But the shells weren't the only artifacts suggesting this was a ritual journey.
No, if you look further into the grave, you find secondary artifacts.
The bird wing bones.
Right. This reinforces the idea of a structured ritual send-off. The bones suggest a whole or partial bird was deliberately included, likely for its symbolic meaning.
And if you look at Norse mythology, the symbolism of birds is just immense. I mean, they're often linked to Odin.
Kujin and Munin, the ravens.
Right. So bird wings could represent transformation, protection on the final journey, or just the spiritual passage itself.
So now we have this layered symbolic structure. The shells hinting at the sea or travel or trade.
And the wings hinting at transcendence, protection, or the aid of the gods. It's a powerful combination.
All designed to assist their respected matriarch in her transition to the afterlife.
And to really strengthen the idea that this was a tradition tied specifically to this one family, we have to talk about the site itself. This wasn't a one-off grave.
Correct. Earlier excavations nearby unearthed another skeleton. And researchers determined that individual was buried 2 to 3 generations older than our woman.
And did that grave have shells?
No, that's the thing, no shells. But it did contain high-status grave goods from the 8th century, another powerful local resident.
So the hypothesis is strong. This was a long-used, sacred burial site for one powerful family.
They were using this specific piece of land for generations, signaling their claim and their power in the region.
Which turns the mystery from a pan-Scandinavian puzzle into a very specific local history riddle.
Exactly. If this ritual was tied to this lineage, it explains why we've never seen it anywhere else in Norway. We are asking what specific beliefs this family held that required this final gesture, but only for the younger woman.
So maybe the shells were a new thing, introduced later in their lineage. A new symbol they picked up through trade, but incorporated into an older family burial rite.
That's a very compelling idea.
The thought that this local family developed their own unique funerary rite is genuinely exciting. It makes Viking society feel so much less monolithic.
And this complexity is precisely why modern archaeology is having to rethink some of its old assumptions. The record is full of these localized exceptions to the rule.
So let's bring this all back to the present. What does this all mean for you as we wait for the final reports? What comes next for the scientists?
Well, the next phase is purely high-tech. The team is conducting comprehensive analysis.
Like DNA.
Absolutely. Detailed DNA analysis, which will confirm her ancestry, her age, and crucially, whether or not she was genetically related to that other individual found at the site.
So if they are related, the lineage theory moves from hypothesis to, well, established fact.
Pretty much. And beyond the DNA, there's stable isotope analysis, which is incredible for painting a picture of her life.
Right. That tells you where she lived.
By analyzing trace elements, they can determine if she was local to Trøndelag or if she moved there from somewhere else, maybe even a distant land.
Which could help explain where the shells came from in the first place.
And of course, the main goal is still solving the mystery of the ritual itself. They're looking for historical or mythological parallels anywhere in Northern Europe that might explain the shells and the bird wings together.
So ultimately, the value here is just immense.
Yeah.
This one small, unexpected detail, the shell's cracks, open this window onto Viking identity that goes so far beyond the usual stories of raiding.
It really does. It focuses on the deeply personal, the localized, and the spiritual life of a powerful non-warrior.
Yeah.
The discovery of this 9th century mistress of the farm in Trøndelag, defined by her status and this baffling shell ritual, it just challenges our understanding of how quickly symbols could travel and evolve in the early Viking Age.
It forces a paradigm shift.
It reminds us that every farmstead, every powerful family likely held unique customs that, well, they really complicate any easy summary of pre-Christian Scandinavia.
It really does. I think that leaves a final question for you to mull over. The scallop shell is recognized globally as a symbol of the vast ocean of pilgrimage, the longest journeys. So given all the evidence that this was a pagan burial and that this unique ritual wasn't about the later Christian faith, what aspect of this powerful matriarch's life or her community's belief was so defining they chose a symbol of the distant sea to seal the mouth of their respected leader? That's the kind of complex, beautiful puzzle that keeps history alive.
Okay, one question for you. What does the jewelry found in the grave reveal about the woman's social status? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.